The crack of gunfire rolled across the Montana plains like thunder, scattering a cloud of blackbirds against a sky burning red with the dying sun. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Mae Collins clutched her trembling hand to the blood soaking through her riding skirt, strands of her golden hair slipping loose as she collapsed against the trunk of a lone cottonwood. 3 days of running had wrung her dry, and her strength was nearly gone. It was 1878, and the frontier still carried a wildness that could crush even the strongest soul. Mae had learned that bitter truth when the stage out of Silver Creek was waylaid by outlaws. She alone had fled into the wilderness, a bullet buried in her thigh, hunted by vengeance that trailed her every step. The thud of hoofbeats drew near, making her heart jump with dread. She tried to drag herself deeper into the shadows, but pain pinned her down. "Easy there," a steady voice called, deep as bedrock. "You're bleeding something fierce, ma'am." Mae squinted through the gloom, catching sight of a tall rider swinging down from a chestnut stallion. His hat brim cast his face in shadow, but she could see broad shoulders and the gleam of a lawman's star. "Stay back," she rasped, her voice weaker than she'd meant. "I've got a gun. And I've got bandages, water, and a fair hand at pulling bullets," the man replied, his steps measured but confident. The last wash of sunlight showed a face worn by years beneath the sky, eyes kind, a jaw roughened with stubble. "Name's Colt Harding, sheriff over in Whispering Pines, 20 miles east." He crouched near her, keeping respectful distance. "Mind if I take a look at that wound?" Mae hesitated, instinctive caution warring with desperation. Her vision was starting to blur. "The men who shot me, they'll be hunting still." Colt's eyes hardened. "Then we best get you to safety before I deal with that leg. Will you let me help you, Miss Mae?" "Mae Collins," she muttered, wincing as fresh pain surged. "It hurts too much to move." His gaze softened. He brushed her hand gently from the wound. "That's why I'm here, Miss Collins, to make sure you don't bear it alone." The plain truth in his words broke her defenses. Tears streaked down her dusty cheeks as she gave a faint nod. Colt went to work rinsing the wound with water from his canteen, binding it with a clean kerchief. He grimaced at the depth, but kept his voice calm. "Bullet's still lodged in there. I can dig it out, but not here. My place is about an hour's ride. It'll be rough, but I'll go easy." Mae bit her lip until she tasted blood. "I don't have much choice, do I?" "There's always a choice," he said, tying off the bandage. "Sometimes none worth liking." Despite the pain, a faint smile tugged her mouth. "You speak mighty peculiar for a sheriff." "Colt," he corrected, lifting her gently into his arms. "Out here, titles don't matter when a body's bleeding." The ride to his cabin blurred into agony. Mae drifted in and out, her cheek resting against his chest, clinging to the steady drum of his heartbeat, and the low murmur of his voice, half meant for her, half for his horse, urging them both to hang on. The cabin came into view like a lantern-lit vision, its log walls glowing amber through the night. Colt carried her inside, laying her on a narrow bed covered with a patchwork quilt that smelled of pine smoke. "That bullet has to come out now," he said, setting more lamps ablaze in the single-room cabin. "I won't sugarcoat it. Mae, it's gonna hurt." She nodded weakly as he gathered what he needed, a bottle of whiskey, clean rags, a knife heated in the lamp's flame, and a pair of long tweezers that made her stomach twist. "Here," he said, handing her the whiskey. "Drink what you can stomach." Mae swallowed fire until she gasped and shoved it away. "Who taught you to do this war?" he said flatly, rolling his sleeves to reveal scarred forearms hardened with muscle. "I patched more men than I care to remember." He placed a leather strap between her teeth. "Bite hard. Scream if you must, no one for miles will hear." The pain that followed was like nothing she'd known. She bit down until her jaw throbbed, tears cutting tracks into her hair as Colt's steady hands worked. When the slug finally came free with a sickening pop, she nearly blacked out. "You're holding strong," he murmured, his voice the only rope keeping her tethered. "Worst part's done." He cleaned and stitched her wound, finishing, as dawn spilled pale light across the wooden floor. Mae lay drained but sharp-minded, whiskey and pain stripping away any false walls. "Why are you helping me?" she asked as Colt rinsed his hands in a basin. "You don't know me. I could be an outlaw myself." He turned, studying her with storm-gray eyes. "Are you no?" she whispered. "But the men chasing me. They're killers. By helping me, you've painted a target on yourself." Colt dried his hands and sat beside the bed. In the new light, she saw him clear, tall, broad hair streaked with silver at the temples. "I've been a target before," he said with a shrug. "Tell me what they want, and I'll decide if the risk is worth it." Mae drew a shaking breath. It was the Silver Creek stage, 4 of them led by a man called Garth Slade. They shot the driver and the guard without a word. Her voice broke as the memory clawed its way back. "There was an older couple and a young fellow traveling with me. The Carlin family had a strongbox meant for their son in Helena. Slade wanted it. There had been 3 other passengers, an older couple and a young man. The Carlin family carried a strongbox meant for their boy in Helena. Garth Slade wanted it." Colt Harding's jaw tightened. Mae's voice broke into a whisper. "They murdered every one of them." She clenched the quilt in her fists. "I was hidden under the seat. They didn't notice me at first, but when they started rifling through the bodies, I panicked. I bolted. One of them put a bullet in me, but I managed to reach the trees." Her eyes filled with guilt. "I should have stayed. Should have tried to help them." "You'd be lying dead beside them if you had," Colt said flatly. "How long have you been running?" 3 days, Mae answered. "I moved at night, hid by day. Yesterday they caught my trail again." She locked eyes with him. "I'll understand if you send me off once I can travel. This isn't your fight." Colt stepped to the window, the rising sun touching his weathered face. 8 years back, Outlaws robbed a stage. My wife and little girl were on it. Clara Belle and Daisy Ray. His voice cracked low. "I wasn't there. I was playing sheriff in a town that hardly needed one." He turned expression carved in stone. "So you see, Mae Collins, this is my fight." The days that followed slipped into a strange stillness. Her wound began to knit clean under his steady hands, and fever never set in. Bit by bit, her strength returned. His cabin was plain, but cared for. They filled the hours with checkers on a carved wooden board, reading from his small shelf of books and stories of his life. Texas ranch country, riding with rangers, the joy and grief of his short marriage to Clara Belle. In return, Mae shared her past, a Boston childhood, parents lost to influenza, left alone at 22, and her choice to head west to teach school. One evening, over a simple pot of rabbit stew, Colt gave her a steady look. "Seems like we're both running. Me from ghosts. You from men with guns." Mae's mouth curved in a tired smile. "At least ghosts don't pull triggers." "No," Colt said quietly, "but they keep you awake all the same." His gaze lingered on her. "You're healing well. In another week you could travel." A sharp pang stung her chest. "Are you eager to see me gone, Sheriff?" "Not particularly," he admitted, eyes crinkling. "But you've got a life to build, and there's still the matter of Slade and his crew. What do you plan to do about them? What I should have done long ago, hunt them down and see justice served. His tone hardened. These hills have carried outlaws too long. Folks deserve safe roads. You mean to take them on alone? Mae pressed. It's my duty. He shrugged. It's suicide, she shot back, leaning forward. There are at least 4. 3. A gravelly voice cut in from the doorway. Both spun toward the sound. A tall figure filled the frame lantern glow, outlining his shape. Mae's pulse raced until he stepped into the light, revealing a lined face beneath a U.S. Marshal's hat. Frank Colt let out the breath he'd been holding. Damn near got yourself shot. Marshal Amos Granger strode in, pulling off his hat to show gray at the temples. Wouldn't be the first time. His sharp eyes flicked to Mae. This the young lady you wrote me about? Colt nodded. Mae Collins, meet U.S. Marshal Amos Granger, an old friend, one of the few lawmen I'd trust with my back. The marshal dipped his head politely. Miss Collins, glad to see you on the mend. When your message reached me in Helena, I feared we'd be too late. Message Mae turned to Colt. The morning after I found you, Colt explained. Rode to Copper Creek at dawn, wired him a telegram. Granger hung his hat on a peg, accepted the coffee Colt poured. I've been on Slade's trail for months. His gangs hit stages clear from here to Wyoming. But they're short a man now. What happened? Colt asked. Found him dead 15 miles south. Shot clean through the heart. The marshal's gaze slid to Mae. Looks like our Miss Collins handles a pistol better than she lets on. Mae paled. I did fire at them when they spotted me, but I was running. Never thought I hit anyone. Well, you did, Amos said without malice, and it's got Garth Slade in a fury. He ain't used to losing men or quarry. Colt's eyes narrowed. All the more reason to strike first. That's why I came, Amos agreed. 3 deputies wait in town. We ride at first light. I'm going too, Mae said, her voice firm. Both men turned on her. Absolutely not, Colt said. I'm the only one who can name them all, she cut him off. And I'm through running. The folks slaughtered on that stage deserve justice. Amos studied her with new respect. The lady's got a point, Colt. She's still half-healed, Colt growled. So were you more than once, Amos countered. Didn't keep you from fighting. That's different. Is it Mae challenged, or is it because I'm a woman? Colt dragged a hand through his hair, frustration burning. Because I care what happens to you, he admitted, voice dropping. I've already buried too many I couldn't save. The room fell into heavy silence, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Amos cleared his throat, uneasy. I'll step out for a smoke, he muttered, leaving them alone. I'll step out for a smoke, Marshal Amos Granger muttered, tipping his hat as he slipped out the door. Left alone. Mae Collins rose carefully from her chair, each step slow, against the dull ache in her leg. She crossed to where Colt Harding stood near the window, his broad shoulders shadowed in the lamplight. I know what you're afraid of, she said gently. But locking me away won't undo what happened to Clara Bell and Daisy Ray, and it won't keep me safe forever. Garth Slade isn't going to quit hunting. Colt's shoulders sagged. I know. He lowered his gaze. Conflict written in his storm-gray eyes. Truth is, Mae Collins, I've grown mighty fond of having you here. Her heart gave a startled leap. And I've grown fond of being here, she whispered. But this isn't over yet. Let me help finish it. Then maybe we can talk about what comes after. He studied her face for a long, searching moment before giving a slow nod. All right, but when the shooting starts, you stay behind us, and you follow my lead without question. Swear it. I swear, she said, relief, and a spark of anticipation mixing in her chest. Don't thank me yet? He warned, though a reluctant smile tugged at his lips. Amos snores like a grizzly with a head cold, and the road to Whispering Pines is long. Mae laughed bright against the quiet cabin walls. I've lived through worse these past days." "Yes," Colt said softly, eyes locked on hers. "Yes, you have." Morning came cold and clear, frost painting the grass outside. Mae pulled on the clothes Colt had found for her sturdy trousers, a flannel shirt and a wool coat a little too big, but warm enough for the trail. The night before, Amos had gone back to town to ready his men and secure fresh mounts. Colt rose before dawn, checking the action on his Winchester, oiling his Colt revolver, and handing her a small Derringer. "Keep this in your pocket," he told her, showing her how to load and fire. "It's only good up close, but it could save you if things go bad." As they stood in the doorway, Mae glanced back at the small cabin that had become her refuge. Colt noticed the hesitation. "We'll come back," he said quietly, stepping beside her. "When this is done." She looked at him, surprised at the word "we." A faint flush touched his weathered cheeks. "If you want to, that is." Before she could answer, hoofbeats sounded Amos returning. The moment slipped away, but the promise lingered fragile as glass. The ride to Whispering Pines stretched through most of the day. Mae's leg throbbed fiercely by the time they reached the frontier town, but she kept her chin up, offering Colt a steady smile each time he glanced her way with worry. Gradually, her grit won his admiration. Whispering Pines was little more than a single street lined with wooden fronts, a general store, a saloon, a hotel, a livery, and the sheriff's office. Townsfolk paused to stare as their party rode in curiosity and unease, plain at the sight of a U.S. Marshal with deputies flanking Colt and Mae. They dismounted at the sheriff's office, where a map of the surrounding country lay spread across the table. Inside, Amos introduced his men. Jonah Pike, a quiet former Buffalo soldier. Zeke Turner, a sharp-eyed young deputy. And Harlan Beck, a grizzled tracker. "According to our word," Amos said, pointing to a mark in the foothills 15 miles west, "Slade's holed up in an abandoned mining camp. Silver played out 5 years ago, but it makes a strong hideout." 3 men left entrenched and armed heavy, Colt muttered, studying the map. "Won't be easy." "Never is with Garth Slade," Harlan growled. "Mean as a rattler and twice as slippery." Mae leaned in, tracing a finger along the paper. "There's another route here. The stage took this trail before the ambush. A narrow pass runs behind these hills." The men looked at her in surprise. "How do you know that?" Amos asked. "I memorized the route before we left Silver Creek," Mae answered. "My father taught me never to travel without knowing the map." Colt and Amos exchanged a look of respect. "If we come from both sides," Colt began, "we might catch them in a crossfire," Amos finished. "Smart thinking, Miss Collins." Plans were laid. Amos, Colt, and Jonah would ride straight up the trail while Zeke and Harlan circled through the pass Mae had pointed out. She, however, would stay in town under the watch of Tobias "Toby" Nash, the young local deputy whose nerves were plain in his eyes. When the plans were set, Amos and his men left to ready their gear, leaving Colt and Mae alone. "Best get some rest," he advised, as they walked toward the hotel. "Tomorrow will be long." Mae nodded, though her nerves were strung tight. At the hotel door, she turned suddenly. "Colt, whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know I'm grateful. You've risked more than I had any right to ask." He shifted eyes, softening. "I haven't done anything any decent man wouldn't." "We both know that's not true," she said gently. "You could have left me under that cottonwood. Instead, you opened your home, and you've risked your life." Colt looked down at his boots, searching for words. When he lifted his gaze, Mae felt her breath catch at the raw honesty in his eyes. "When Clarabelle and Daisy Ray died, I lost my purpose. I just kept breathing nothing more. Then I found you bleeding and stubborn as a wounded wildcat, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to care again. For years I've just been drifting, breathing but not living. Colt Harding admitted, his voice low and raw. Then I stumbled across you, bleeding fierce as a cornered mountain cat, and something shifted. He shook his head, struggling for words. Suddenly, I remembered what it felt like to care about someone more than my own hide. Mae Collins' breath caught. Before she could speak, Colt leaned down and brushed his lips against hers, a question more than a kiss. She answered by lifting her hand to his cheek, her touch feather light, returning the pressure. When they parted, his eyes were dark with emotion. "That wasn't proper of me," he muttered. "I'm not exactly worried about propriety right now," Mae whispered back, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Get some rest, Mae Collins," Colt said softly. "Tomorrow I aim to take you back to my cabin, and I'd like you awake enough to enjoy the ride." She nodded and stepped away, though her heart pounded. "Be careful tomorrow, Colt Harding. I've grown rather attached to you." His smile widened into something warm and real. "Yes, ma'am." Mae watched him go, her lips still tingling from his kiss, hope and fear stirring together in her chest. Tomorrow would bring danger, but for the first time since the ambush, she dared to imagine a future beyond survival. Dawn crept in, wrapped in mist, turning whispering pines into a ghost town of shadows. Mae stood on the hotel porch as Colt Marshal Amos Granger and the deputies readied for departure. Though she'd been ordered to stay behind, she had already dressed in the sturdy clothes Colt had given her. Her resolve grew harder with every heartbeat. When Colt approached, his eyes told her he knew her mind. "Don't even think it," he warned, his voice steady. "You swore to follow my lead, and I'm telling you to stay here with Deputy Tobias Nash." Mae lifted her chin. "And if Garth Slade comes here while you're gone, Tobias looks like he'd faint at his own shadow." "Cooper swears they're at the mining camp," Colt countered. "All three. He could be wrong." She grasped his hand, her fingers cold but firm. "Colt, I can't sit here imagining the worst. Please." He studied her face, torn, then finally sighed. "You stay with me. Behind me at all times. If the shooting starts, you find cover, and stay put, understood?" Relief swept through her. "Understood." Amos wasn't pleased, but relented with a shrug. "Your call, Colt. But if she takes another bullet, don't expect me to dig it out." The mist thinned as the sun rose, and 6 riders headed west in somber silence. Mae rode a gentle mare from the livery positioned between Colt and Jonah Pike, who watched her with concern, but said nothing. The trail grew harsher as they neared the foothills, and after nearly 3 hours, they were close. A mile out, the group split, Amos and Jonah pressing up the main path, while Zeke Turner and Harlan Beck circled wide to flank from behind, using the pass Mae had marked. Colt and Mae waited by a stream, listening to the hush of the wilderness. "Are you scared?" Mae asked quietly. "Yes," Colt answered without hesitation. "Not of dying. I made peace with that long ago. I'm scared of failing, of Slade slipping away again, of you getting hurt." His eyes locked on hers. "I am afraid," Mae admitted with a soft smile. "But I'm ready for this to end, ready for whatever comes next." Colt reached for her hand, rough fingers folding around hers. "When this is over, I'd like to court you proper, Mae Collins, if you'd allow it." Her heart leapt. "I believe I'd like that very much, Sheriff Harding." A bird call, 3 sharp whistles cut through the air. Colt released her hand and reached for his rifle. "That's Amos's signal. Zeke and Harlan are in place." His face hardened. "Last chance to stay back." Mae shook her head. "I'm with you." Together they moved up the ridge overlooking the camp. Weathered shacks clustered around the dark mouth of the mine. Smoke curled from the foreman's cabin, 3 horses penned in a rough corral. Colt pointed to a boulder. "Stay behind that. You'll see it all, but you'll have cover." Mae crouched as Colt tied the horses to a scrub pine and readied his Winchester. From their perch, they watched Amos and Jonah move from cover to cover below. Zeke and Harlan stayed hidden, waiting to cut off escape. The standoff began with a crack gunfire spitting dirt at Amos's boots. He and Jonah dove behind an ore cart. Garth Slade, Amos bellowed. "This is U.S. Marshal Amos Granger. You're surrounded. Throw out your weapons and come out with your hands up." From the cabin came laughter, cold and mocking. "Come and get us." "Marshal," a voice jeered from the cabin, rough with arrogance. "We've got grub for weeks and more lead than you've got men." Another shot cracked, this one from the western ridge, Zeke Turner, or Harlan Beck, letting them know the circle was tight. For long, breathless minutes, nothing stirred. Then the cabin door creaked open and a white cloth flickered. "Maybe they're giving up." "Mae Collins," whispered hope in her voice. Colt Harding's eyes stayed hard. "Garth Slade doesn't surrender." Even as he spoke, bedlam broke loose. 2 outlaws burst from the rear, firing as they dashed for the corral. From the front, a tall figure in a black duster laid down cover fire with a rifle lead screaming in every direction. Marshal Amos Granger and Jonah Pike fired back from their position, while reports from the west told of Zeke and Harlan engaging as well. Colt settled his Winchester, drew a bead, and squeezed the trigger. One runner cried out, clutching his leg, but stumbling on toward the horses while his partner laid cover. The air filled with smoke and the crack of rifles. Mae pressed tight against the boulder, heart hammering as bullets snapped overhead. Through the haze, she spotted the wounded man. Her blood ran cold. It was the outlaw who'd shot her as she fled the stage. Even at this distance, she knew the scar on his cheek and the red bandana at his throat. Then movement to her left caught her eye. Garth Slade himself was climbing the ridge, cutting straight toward them. Colt, intent on the fight below, hadn't seen him. "Colt," she cried. Slade spotted them at the same instant, pistol rising. Colt spun, shouldering his rifle, but the outlaw fired first. The bullet tore through Colt's shoulder, spinning him back. His shot went wide. Mae gasped as Colt crumpled against the rocks, crimson spreading across his shirt. Slade grinned wolfishly, leveling his pistol at Colt's chest. Mae's hand shot to her pocket, drawing the little derringer Colt had pressed on her. The tiny weapon felt pitiful against the outlaw's hulking frame, but she remembered his words. Close range was all that mattered. "Drop it," she ordered, stepping out from cover. Slade's grin widened. "Well, well," the one that slipped the noose. "Been hunting for you, girl." He kept his gun on Colt, but angled toward her. "That toy won't stop me. It will if I put a hole in your eye." Mae shot back, her voice steady. "At this distance, I won't miss." For the first time, doubt flickered across his face. Then a gunshot rang from below. One of his men screamed, and the sound of a horse bolting echoed. The distraction was enough. Colt, bleeding but fierce, lunged and drove into Slade's legs. Both men crashed to the ground, Slade's pistol firing into the air before clattering away. Mae darted in, snatched up the weapon, and aimed as they wrestled in the dirt. Colt's strength was ebbing with blood loss, but desperation lent him grit. Amos's voice thundered from below. "We're coming up." Slade heard it too, and fought harder, yanking a knife from his boot and slashing Colt's arm. Colt grunted but held on, dragging the outlaw dangerously close to the ridge edge. "Let him go," Mae cried. "I've got his gun." But Colt clung tight, knowing Slade would never quit. "Shoot him," He gasped, blood on his lips. Mae tried to line up a shot at Slade's leg, but the men rolled again, then suddenly both vanished over the ridge. Colt. Mae screamed, scrambling forward. The drop was 15 feet down a rocky slope. Colt and Slade lay in a heap at the bottom, unmoving. Mae slid down recklessly, landing hard, but pushing on, reaching Colt's side, just as Amos and Jonah appeared above. Colt, she sobbed, rolling him gently onto his back. His face was ghost-pale blood soaking his shoulder and a fresh cut on his temple. Behind her, Amos bent over Slade, but Mae saw only Colt. She pressed trembling fingers to his throat. "Please, please don't leave me!" Agonizing seconds dragged by before she felt it, the faint, steady thrum of his heartbeat. "He's alive," she cried, looking up as Amos crouched beside her. "He's alive but bleeding bad," the marshal said grimly. "Jonah helped me get him up top. Zeke," he bellowed toward the ridge, "bring the horses, we've got to get him back to town fast." "What about Slade?" Mae asked, refusing to let go of Colt's hand. Dead Amos replied, short and final. Neck snapped in the fall. His cruiser finished, one dead one, captured one, dropped by Harlan's rifle. Mae's chest heaved with relief, but fear still clutched her tighter than iron. All that mattered was Colt Harding breathing beneath her hands. As they hauled Colt Harding up the rocky slope, his eyelids flickered open. Mae Collins clung to his hand, walking close beside the men carrying him. "I'm here. Don't try to speak, we're getting you help." His fingers gave a faint squeeze. "Told you to stay behind that rock." Despite everything, a shaky laugh broke from her. "I did until you needed saving." A ghost of a smile brushed his pale lips before he slipped back under. The ride to Whispering Pines turned into a desperate race. They rigged a travois for Colt Mae riding at his side, watching in terror as his breathing grew shallow. By the time they reached town, fever burned hot in his skin. The town doctor, a grizzled man named Howard Bennett, took one look and barked orders. "Gunshot blood loss may be worse from the fall. Bring him inside." He ripped away Colt's shirt, muttering as he worked. "You all wait outside." "I'm staying." Mae cut in rinsing blood from her hands in the basin, her tone leaving no room for argument. Bennett narrowed his eyes. "You know a damn thing about medicine, girl. My father was a doctor in Boston. I worked with him for years," she said firmly. "And Colt saved my life. I won't leave him." The doctor's face softened. "Then do exactly as I say." What followed were the longest hours of Mae's life. Bennett pulled the slug from Colt's shoulder, stitched the knife gash in his arm, and bound his cracked ribs. Through it all, Colt never stirred his breath, ragged, his pulse faint. The bullet missed the vital parts, Bennett explained, binding the shoulder tight. "But he's bled near dry. That head wound's trouble too. Next 24 hours will tell." Mae sank into the chair at Colt's bedside. "I'll watch him." The doctor gave her a look that cut straight through. "You love him?" It wasn't a question. "Yes," she whispered. "Then keep talking. Sometimes a familiar voice keeps a soul from crossing over." When he left, Mae clasped Colt's limp hand. "You've got to fight," she whispered fiercely. "You promised to court me proper. I'm holding you to it." She brushed dark hair from his fevered brow. "You still owe me poker lessons, shooting lessons, and those Texas stories." All through the night, she spoke, her voice hoarse by dawn. She told him about her childhood in Boston, her dreams of teaching her hopes for a place where she belonged. When words failed, she held his hand, counting each shallow rise and fall of his chest. Then, just as the first light broke, Colt stirred. Mae jerked awake at the faint twitch of his fingers. "Colt," she breathed, leaning close, his eyes cracked open, clouded with pain but aware. "You're still here," he rasped. "Of course I am. Where else would I be?" He licked his dry lips, wincing. Garth Slade. Dead, she said quickly. All his men, too. It's over. He shut his eyes a moment, as if a weight had lifted. When he looked again, his gaze was clearer. Hurts like hell. Mae's tears spilled as she smiled. That's why I'm here, she whispered, echoing the words he'd once given her under the cottonwood. So you don't face it alone. A faint smile tugged at his mouth. You've got away with words, Miss Collins. I learned from the best Sheriff Harding. Recovery came slow. 2 days later, infection set in fever-racking Colt once more. Dr. Bennett fought with poultices and bitter medicine, while Mae bathed his burning skin and coaxed broth past his lips whenever he surfaced from delirium. Marshal Amos Granger and his men lingered in Whispering Pines for a week, keeping order while the town's lawmen lay stricken. Before leaving for Helena with the captured outlaw, Amos stopped at Colt's bedside. You always had more grit than good sense. The marshal grunted, clasping Colt's hand carefully. But you got him. After 8 years, you finally put down the man who killed Clara Bell and Daisy Ray. Colt's eyes widened. Slade. It was him. Amos nodded grimly, found proof in his saddlebag. A locket, Clara Bell's picture inside. Kept it like a trophy. He glanced toward Mae, standing nearby. I suspected, Colt admitted weakly. When Mae told me how he hit that stage, it sounded too familiar. But I wasn't sure until now. After Amos left, Mae sat at Colt's side, still reeling. You never told me you thought Slade was the one who killed them. Colt exhaled, heavy with old grief. I didn't want vengeance weighing on you, too. That was my burden. It became mine the moment they ambushed my stage, Mae said gently, her hand closing over his. And it became our fight the moment you found me under that cottonwood, Mae Collins, whispered, her fingers curling gently around Colt Harding's bandaged hand. No more secrets, Colt. Promise me. He studied the face that had come to mean so much in so short a time, then gave a slow, solemn nod. I promise. It took 2 more weeks before Dr. Bennett allowed Colt to leave his care, though, with strict orders not to push himself for at least a month. In that time, the folks of Whispering Pines rallied together, cooking meals, tending to chores, and stepping in where their sheriff could not. When the day finally came for Colt to head home, Tobias Toby Nash arranged a wagon to carry him. Riding was out of the question. As Mae helped button his clean shirt, her voice wavered. The school's looking for a teacher for spring term, she told him. Here in town. Not at your cabin. Colt's hands stilled over hers. I thought you'd want quiet to heal, she added, uncertain. Mae Collins, he said slowly, his voice firming with each word. If you believe I aim to recover without you at my side, then that bullet rattled my brain worse than Doc thinks. Her smile bloomed like sunlight. You want me to go back with you? I want you to come home with me, he corrected. They'll talk, she warned softly, though her heart soared. Let 'em, he said, a grin spreading across his pale face. We'll give 'em more to talk about soon enough. The ride back to the cabin took all day with frequent stops so Colt could rest. Mae drove the wagon. Colt stretched out on a bedroll, pointing out landmarks and offering quiet remarks. Near the final bend in the trail, he stirred. Stop a moment, he said, climbing gingerly to the seat beside her. I want to see it with you. First time should be as home, not just a refuge. Mae flicked the reins, and the horses rounded the bend. The cabin stood golden in the late light, smoke curling from the chimney. Someone's here, Mae murmured. I asked Toby to ride ahead, light a fire, make it ready, Colt explained. As they drew closer, Mae noticed more porch, swept clean windows shining, and a new rocking chair by the door. The chairs from the townsfolk, Colt said, following her gaze. A thank you for ending Garth Slade's reign, and according to the mayor's wife, a wedding present. Mae turned, startled. A wedding present? Colt shifted, uncertain whether it was pain or nerves. Seems the town has notions about us. He reached into his pocket and drew out a small box. I meant to do this better, but... He opened his palm. A simple gold ring set with a modest diamond caught the fading sun. It was my mother's, he said quietly. I carried it since Clara Belle died. Never thought I'd offer it again. But then you came along, bleeding, stubborn, brave as any soul I've known. I know it's quick, we've only had weeks, but you gave me back hope. A future. His voice broke. I love you, Mae Collins. Will you marry me? The world stilled. Mae's eyes blurred with tears as she looked at him, worn, wounded, yet filled with such tender hope, it stole her breath. Yes, she whispered, then stronger. Yes, Colt Harding, I will. His smile burst like sunrise. With trembling fingers, he slid the ring onto her hand, sealing it with a kiss full of all the gentleness and fire she'd come to know in him. When they parted, Mae pressed her forehead to his. I love you too. From the night you carried me through the dark and swore I wouldn't face the pain alone. And you never will. Colt vowed, brushing away her tears. That's a promise I'll keep all my days. 2 weeks later, they wed in the small church of Whispering Pines. Marshal Amos Granger stood as Colt's best man, and Mrs. Wilson, the mayor's wife, attended Mae. The whole town turned out, and the celebration spilled into the street, laughter and music carrying well into the night. Spring painted the Montana hills green as Colt regained strength. Mae took up teaching in the town schoolhouse, riding back and forth on the mare she now called her own, while Colt resumed his badge. Toby Nash handling the heavier work. Evenings were spent in the cabin now, truly their home, playing checkers, reading aloud, making plans for the future. There were hard nights. Mae woke, shaking from nightmares of gunfire. Colt grew irritable when phantom pains gnawed at him, but they faced it together. By summer, a small garden thrived behind the cabin, and an addition rose to serve as Mae's winter classroom. Colt's shoulder still ached before storms, but his spirit was lighter, his life no longer haunted by loss alone. On a warm August evening, they sat side by side on the porch, watching the sun sink and paint the far-off Montana peaks in fire and purple shadow. Colt Harding's arm draped around Mae Collins, his fingers absently combing through her hair. At length he broke the comfortable silence. Got a letter from Amos today. She lifted her head from his shoulder. What did he say? They've named all the folks Slade's gang robbed and killed? Families have been told. Mae pressed closer. Good. They deserve to know. Colt hesitated before adding, Governor's thinkin' of setting up a marshal's office in Helena. Asked if I'd take the job. Mae straightened to look at him. And would you? A few months back, maybe? Chance to bring more men like Garth Slade to justice. He shook his head. But now I'm content right where I am. Sheriff of Whispering Pines. Husband to a remarkable woman. Maybe one day, father. Mae's heart leapt. You want children? His expression softened. More than anything. If you do. She smiled, taking his hand and laying it against her middle. Then I've got news for you, Sheriff Harding. It took him a second, then realization dawned. You mean Doc Bennett confirmed it yesterday, she said, joy spilling into her words. Come spring, we'll have a baby. For a heartbeat, Colt was stunned. Then he let out a whoop so loud it startled the horses in the corral. He lifted her, carefully spinning her once, as their laughter mingled with the night air. A baby, he breathed, setting her down gently. Our baby. Our family. Mae whispered, tears shining in her eyes. He pulled her close, voice husky against her hair. Thank you for trusting me that night, for fighting to live, for loving me when I thought I was too broken. She framed his face with her hands. We saved each other, Colt Harding, and we'll keep on doing it every day. As the last light faded, they stood on their porch, two souls who had found not just love, but healing and the promise of a future. The years that followed brought both trial and blessing. Their daughter Clara Belle was born one snowy April morning in 1879. Colt, who had paced outside through every hour of Mae's labor, wept openly when he first cradled her. Whispering pines grew from a rough settlement into a true town, and eventually Colt handed his badge to Tobias Toby Nash, who had grown into a steady lawman under his watch. Colt turned his focus to their homestead, expanding the cabin, adding a proper kitchen, extra bedrooms, and starting a small horse breeding ranch known across the territory. Mae continued teaching first from their home, later in the new town schoolhouse, her reputation drawing families from miles around. Marshal Amos Granger visited whenever duty brought him north, playing the proud uncle to Clara Belle, and later to little Jonah, their son, with his father's dark hair and his mother's fire. Life remained harsh, blizzards, droughts, the endless work of frontier living, but Mae and Colt faced it together, their bond only hardening with time. On their 10th anniversary, Colt surprised her with a journey to Yellowstone, newly declared the nation's first park. For 2 weeks they rode beneath geysers and star-filled skies, rediscovering each other away from the weight of home. One night by the fire, Colt brushed his thumb over the gold band on her finger. Any regrets, Mae? Not a one, she said honestly, leaning against him. Though sometimes I wonder how it might have been if Slade hadn't stopped my stage that day. Colt smiled faintly. I reckon we'd have met anyway, maybe at a church picnic or when you came to report a stolen horse. She laughed, shaking her head. You're a romantic Colt Harding. Only with you, he replied, kissing her temple. Always with you. When they rode home, cresting the last hill, their children ran out to meet them, Mrs. Wilson following with a proud smile. Mae's heart filled the old scar on her thigh, twinging faintly with the weather, but now it was only a reminder of the night her life had turned. Home, Colt murmured beside her, voice warm with peace. Home, Mae echoed, spurring her horse forward toward the family waiting at their door, her heart full of the truth she had learned that first night beneath the cottonwood tree. It hurts too much, she had whispered back then. That's why I'm here, he had answered, and he always would be. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you.